Harry Potter, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Chapter 7, Mudbloods and Murmurs. Harry spent a lot of time over the next few days dodging out of sight whenever he saw Gilderoy Lockhart coming down a corridor. Harder to avoid Colin Creevey, who seemed to have memorized... Harder to avoid was Colin Creevey, who seemed to have memorized Harry's timetable. Nothing seemed to give Colin a bigger thrill than to say, "All right, Harry," 6 or 7 times a day, and hear, "Hello, Colin," back, however exasperated Harry sounded when he said it. Hedwig was still angry with Harry about the disastrous car journey, and Ron's wand was still malfunctioning, surpassing itself on Friday morning by shooting out of Ron's hand in charms and hitting tiny old Professor Flitwick square between the eyes, creating a large, throbbing green boil where it had struck. So, with one thing and another, Harry was quite glad to reach the weekend. He, Ron, and Hermione were planning to visit Hagrid on Saturday morning. However, Harry was shaken several hours earlier than he would have liked by Oliver Wood, captain of the Gryffindor Quidditch team. "What's the matter?" said Harry groggily. "Quidditch practice," said Wood. "Come on." Harry squinted out the window. There was a thin mist hanging over the pink and gold sky. Now he was awake. He couldn't stand how... He couldn't understand how he could have slept through the racket the birds were making. "Harry, Oliver," Harry croaked. "It's the crack of dawn." "Exactly," said Wood. He was a tall and burly 6th year at the moment. His eyes were gleaming with a mad enthusiasm. "It's part of our new training program. Come on, grab your broom and let's go," said Wood heartily. "None of the other teams have started yet, and we're going to first off the mark this year." Yawning and shivering slightly, Harry climbed out of bed and tried to find his Quidditch robes. "Good man," said Robe. "Meet you on the pitch in 15 minutes. When he found his Scarlet Team robes and pulled on his cloak for warmth, Harry scribbled a note to Ron, explaining where he'd gone, and went down the spiral staircase to the common room, his Nimbus 2000 on his shoulder. He had just reached the portrait hole when there was a clatter behind him, and Colin Creevey came dashing down the spiral staircase, his camera swinging madly around his neck, and something clutched in his hand. "I heard someone saying your name on the stairs, Harry." "Oh, tired." "Look what I've got here. I've had it developed. I wanted to show you." Harry looked bemusedly at the photograph Colin was brandishing under his nose. A moving black and white Lockhart was tugging hard on Harry's arm, recognized as his own. He was pleased to see that his photographic self was putting up a good fight and refusing to be dragged into the view. As Harry watched, Lockhart gave up and slumped, panting against the white edge of the picture. "Will you sign it?" said Colin eagerly. "No," said Harry flatly, glancing around to check the room was really deserted. "Sorry, Colin. I'm in a hurry. Quidditch practice." He climbed through the portrait hole. "Oh, wow. Wait for me. I've never watched a Quidditch game before." Colin scrambled through the hole after him. "It'll be really boring," said Harry quickly, but Colin ignored him, his face shining with excitement. "You were the youngest house in 100 years. Weren't you, Harry?" "Weren't you?" said Colin, trotting alongside him. "You must be brilliant. I've never flown." "It is easy." "Is it easy? Is that your broom? Is that the best there is?" Harry didn't know how to get rid of him. It was like having an extremely talkative shadow. "I don't really understand Quidditch," said Colin breathlessly. "Is it true that there are 4 balls, and 2 of them fly around trying to knock people off brooms?" "Yes," said Harry, resigned to explaining the complicated rules of Quidditch. "They are called bludgers. There are 2 beaters on each team who carry clubs to beat the bludgers away from their side. Fred and George Weasley are the Gryffindor beaters." "And what are the other balls for?" said Colin, tripping over a couple of stairs because he was gazing open-mouthed at Harry. "Well, the quaffle, that's the biggest red one, is the one that scores goals. 3 chasers on each team throw the quaffle to each other, and try and get through the goalposts. At the end of the pitch, there are 3 long poles with hoops on the end. And the 4th ball is the golden snitch," said Harry, "and it's very small, very fast, and difficult to catch. But that is the seeker's goal, to catch, because the game doesn't end until the snitch has been caught. And whichever team's seeker catches the snitch earns himself an extra 150 points. "And you're Gryffindor's seeker, aren't you?" said Colin in awe. "Yes," said Harry, as they left the castle and started across the dew-drenched grass. "And there's a keeper too. He guards the goalpost. That's it, really." But Colin stopped questioning Harry all the way down the stairs, the sloping lawns to the Quidditch pitch, and Harry only shook him off when he reached the changing rooms. Colin called to him in a piping voice, "I'll go and get a good seat, Harry," and hurried off to the stands. The rest of the Gryffindor team were already in the changing room. Woods was the only one who looked truly awake. Fred and George Weasley were sitting, puffy-eyed and tussle-haired, next to fourth years Alicia Spinnet, who seemed to be nodding off against the wall. Her fellow chaser Katie Bell and Angelina Johnson were yawning side by side opposite them. "There you are, Harry, what kept you?" said Wood briskly. "Now, I wanted a quick talk with you all before we get onto the pitch, because I spent the summer devising a whole new training program, which I think will really make the difference." Woods was holding up a large diagram of a Quidditch pitch, on which were lines drawn, arrows and crosses in different color inks. He took out his wand, tapped the boards, and the arrows began to wiggle over the diagram like caterpillars. As Woods launched into a speech about his new tactics, Fred Weasley hooped. His head drooped right into Alicia Spinnet's shoulder and he began to snore. The first board took nearly 20 minutes to explain, but there was another board under that, and a third under that. Harry sunk into a stupor as Wood droned on and on. "So," said Wood, at last, jerking Harry from a wistful fantasy about what he would be eating for breakfast. At this very moment up at the castle, "Is that clear? Any questions?" "I've got questions, Oliver," said George, who had woken with a start. "Why wouldn't you have told us all this yesterday when we were awake?" Woods wasn't pleased. "Now, listen here, you lot," he said, glowering at all of them. "We should have won the Quidditch Cup last year. We're easily the best team. But unfortunately, owing to circumstances beyond our control..." Harry shifted guiltily in his seat. He had been unconscious in the hospital wing for the final match of the previous year, meaning that Gryffindor had to be a player short and had suffered their worst defeat in 300 years. Wood took a moment to regain control of himself. Their last defeat was clearly still torturing him. "So, this year we trained harder than ever before, okay? Let's go and put our new theories into practice," Wood shouted, seizing his broomstick and leading the way out of the changing rooms. Stiff-legged and still yawning, his team followed. They had been in the changing room so long that the sun was up properly now, although remnants of mist hung over the grass in the stadium. As Harry walked into the pitch, he saw Ron and Hermione sitting in the stands. "Aren't you finished yet?" said Ron incredulously. "Haven't even started," said Harry, looking jealously at the toast and marmalade Ron and Harry had brought out of the Great Hall. "Wood's been teaching us new moves." He mounted his broomstick and kicked off the ground, soaring up into the air. The cool morning air whipped his face, waking him far more effectively than Wood's long talk. It felt wonderful to be back on the Quidditch pitch. He soared right over the stadium at full speed, racing Fred and George. "What's that funny clicking noise?" called Fred as they hustled around the corner. Harry looked into the stands. Colin was sitting in one of the highest seats, his camera raised, taking pictures after them. The sound strangely magnified in the deserted stadium. "Look this way, Harry! This way!" he cried shrilly. "Who's that?" said Fred. "No idea," Harry lied, putting on a spurt of speed that took him as far away from Colin as possible. "What's going on?" said Wood, frowning as he skimmed through the air towards them. "Why is that first year taking pictures? I don't like it. He could be a Slytherin spy trying to get information on our new training program." "He's in Gryffindor," said Harry quickly. "And the Slytherins don't need a spy, Oliver," said George. "What makes you think that?" Wood said testily. "Because they're here in person," said George, pointing. Several people in green robes were walking onto the pitch, broomsticks in their hand. "I don't believe it," Wood hissed in outrage. "I booked the pitch for today. We'll see about this." Wood shot towards the ground, landing rather harder than he meant in his anger. Staggering slightly as he dismounted, Harry, Fred, and George followed. "Flint!" Wood bellowed at the Slytherin captain. "This is our practice time. We got up especially. You can clear off now." Marcus Flint was even larger than Wood. He had a look of trolling cunning on his face as he replied, "Plenty of room for us, Wood." Angelina, Felicia, and Katie had come over too. There were no girls on the Slytherin team, who stood shoulder to shoulder facing the Gryffindors, leering to a man. "But I booked the pitch," said Wood, positively spitting with rage. "I booked it!" "Ah," said Flint, "but I've got a specially signed note here from Professor Snape. I, Professor S. Snape, give the Slytherin team permission to practice on the Quidditch pitch today, owing to the need to train their new Seeker." "You got a new Seeker?" said Wood, distracted. "Where?" And from behind the 6 large figures before them came a 7th smaller boy, smirking all over his pale, pointed face. It was Draco Malfoy. "Aren't you Lucius Malfoy's son?" said Fred, looking at Malfoy with dislike. "Funny you should mention Draco's father," said Flint, as their whole Slytherin team smiled still more broadly. "Let me show you the generous gift that he made to the Slytherin team." All 7 of them held out their broomsticks. 7 highly polished brand new handles and 7 sets of gold fine lettering spelling the words Nimbus 2001 gleamed under the Gryffindor's nose in the early morning sun. "Very latest model. Only came out last month," said Flint carelessly, flicking a speck of dust from the end of his own. "I believe it outstrips the 2000 by a serious considerable amount. As for the old clean sweeps," he smiled nastily at Fred and George, who were both clutching clean sweep 5s, sweeping the boards with them. None of the Gryffindor's team could think of anything to say for a moment. Malfoy was smirking so broadly, his cold eyes were reduced to slits. "Oh, look," said Flint, "a pitch invasion." Ron and Hermione were crossing the grass to see what was going on. "What's happening?" Ron asked Harry. "Why aren't you playing? And what's he doing here?" He looked at Malfoy, taking in his Slytherin Quidditch robes. "I am the new Slytherin Seeker, Weasley," said Malfoy smugly. "Everyone just been admiring the brooms my father brought us." Ron gaped, open-mouthed, and the 7 superb broomsticks in front of him. "Good, aren't they?" said Malfoy smoothly. "But perhaps the Gryffindor team will be able to raise some gold and get new brooms too. You could raffle off those Queen Sleep 5s. I expect the museum would bid high for them." The Slytherin team howled with laughter. "At least no one on the Gryffindor team had to buy their way in," said Hermione sharply. "They got in by pure talent." The smug look on Malfoy's face flickered. "No one asked your opinion, you filthy little mudblood," he spat. Harry knew at once that Malfoy had said something really bad, because there was an instant uproar at his words. Flint had to dive in front of Malfoy to stop Fred and George jumping on him. Alicia shrieked, "How dare you!" And Ron plunged his hand to his wallet, into his robes, and pulled out his wand, yelling, "You'll pay for that one, Malfoy!" and pointed it furiously under Flint's arm at Malfoy's face. A loud bang echoed across the stadium, and a jet of green light shot out of the wrong end of Ron's wand, hitting him in the stomach and sending him reeling backwards into the air. Ron, are you alright?" squealed Hermione. Ron opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instantly, he gave an almighty belch, and several slugs dribbled out of his mouth into his lap. The Slytherin team were paralyzed with laughter. Flint was doubled up, hanging onto his new broomstick for support. Malfoy was on all fours, banging on the ground with his fists. The Gryffindors were all gathered around Ron, who kept belching large, glistening slugs. Nobody seemed to want to touch him. "We'd better get him to Hagrid's. It's nearest," said Harry to Hermione, who nodded bravely. And the pair of them pulled Ron into his arms, up by the arms. "What happened, Harry? What happened? Is he ill?" "But you can cure him, can't you?" Colin had run down from his seat and was now dancing alongside them, and as they left the pitch, Ron gave a huge heave and more slugs dribbled down his front. "Oh," said Colin, fascinated and raising his camera. "Can you hold him still, Harry?" "Get out of the way, Colin," said Harry angrily. He and Hermione supported Ron out of the stadium and across the grounds towards the edge of the forest. "Nearly there, Ron," said Hermione as the gamekeeper's cabin came into view. "You'll be alright in a minute. Almost there." They were within 20 feet of Hagrid's house when the front door opened, but it wasn't Hagrid who emerged. Gilderoy Lockhart, wearing robes of palest mauve today, came striding out. "Quick! Behind here!" Harry hissed, dragging Ron behind a nearby bush. Hermione followed, somewhat reluctantly. "It's a simple matter if you know what you're doing," Lockhart was saying loudly to Hagrid. "If you need help, you know where I am. I'll let you have a copy of my book. I'm surprised you haven't got one already. I'll sign one tonight and send it over. Well, goodbye." And he strode away towards the castle. Harry waited until Lockhart was out of sight, then pulled Ron out of the bush and up to Hagrid's front door. They knocked urgently. Hagrid appeared at once, looking very grumpy, but his expression brightened when he saw who it was. "Been wondering when you'd come see me. Come in, come in. Thought you might have been Professor Lockhart back again." Harry and Hermione supported Ron over the threshold into the one-room cabin, which had an enormous bed in one corner, a fire crackling merry in the other. Hagrid didn't seem perturbed by Ron's slug problem, which Harry hastily explained as he lowered Ron into the chair. "Better out than in," he said cheerfully, plonking a large copper basin in front of him. "Get 'em all up, Ron." "I don't think there's anything we can do except wait for it to stop," said Hermione anxiously, watching Ron bend over the basin. "That's a difficult curse to work at the best of times, but with a broken wand." Hagrid was bustling around making them tea. His boarhound Fang was slobbering over Harry. "What did Lockhart want with you, Hagrid?" Harry asked, scratching Fang's ears. "Giving me advice on keeping kelpies out of the well," growled Hagrid, moving a half-plucked rooster off his scrub table and setting down the teapot. "Like I don't know. And then banging on some other banshee he banished. He banished. If one word of it was true, I'll eat my kettle." It was most unlike Hagrid to criticize a Hogwarts teacher, and Harry looked at him with surprise. Hermione, however, said in a small voice somewhat higher than usual, "I think you're being a little bit unfair. Professor Dumbledore obviously thought he was the best man for the job." "He was the only man for the job," said Hagrid, offering them a plate of treacle toffee, while Ron coughed squelchily into his basin. "And I mean the only one. Getting very difficult to find another dark arts job. People aren't too keen to take it, you see. They're starting to think it's jinxed. No one's lasted longer than a year for now. So tell me," said Hagrid, jerking his head at Ron, "why is he trying to curse? Who's he trying to curse?" "Malfoy called Hermione something. Oh, Malfoy called Hermione something. It must have been really bad because Ron went mad." "It was bad," said Ron hoarsely, emerging over the tabletop, looking pale and sweaty. "Malfoy called her Mudblood, Hagrid." Ron dived out of the sight again as a fresh wave of slugs made their appearance. Hagrid looked outraged. "He didn't," he growled at Hermione. "He did," she said, "but I don't know what it means. I could tell it was really rude, of course. It's about the worst, most insulting thing he could think of," gasped Ron, coming up again. "Mudblood's a really foul name for someone who was born from Muggle parents. You know, non-magic parents. There are some wizards, like Malfoy's family, who think they're better than everyone else because they're the people you call a pure blood." He gave a little burp, and a single slug fell into his outstretched hand. He threw it into the basin and continued. "I mean, the rest of us know it doesn't make any difference at all. Look at Neville Longbottom. He's pure blood, and he can barely stand a cauldron the right way up." "As they haven't invented a spell our Hermione can't do," said Hagrid proudly, making Hermione go a brilliant shade of magenta. "It's a disgusting thing to call someone," said Ron, wiping his sweaty brow with a shaking hand. "Dirty blood, see? Common blood. It's mad. Most wizards these days are half-blood anyway. If we hadn't married muggles, we'd have died out." He retched and ducked out of sight again. "Well, I don't blame you for trying to curse him, Ron," said Hagrid loudly over the thuds of more slugs hitting the basin. "But maybe it was a good thing your wand backfired. Expect if Lucius Malfoy would have come marching up to school if he heard you cursed his son, at least you're not in trouble." Harry would have pointed out that trouble didn't come much worse than having slugs pouring out of your mouth, but he couldn't. Hagrid's treacle toffee had cemented his jaws together. "Harry," said Hagrid suddenly, as though struck by a sudden thought, "got a bone to pick with you. I've heard you've been giving out signed photos. How come I haven't gotten one?" Furious, Harry wrenched his teeth apart. "I have not been giving out signed photos," he said hotly. "If Lockhart's still putting that about..." But then he saw Hagrid was laughing. "I'm only joking," he said, patting Harry gently on the back and sending him face first into the table. "I know you hadn't really. I told Lockhart you didn't need to. More famous than him without trying." "But he didn't like that," said Harry, sitting up and rubbing his chin. "Don't think he did," said Hagrid, his eyes twinkling. "And then I told him I'd never read one of his books, and he decided to go. Treacle toffee, Ron," he added as Ron appeared. "No thanks," said Ron weakly. Better not risk it. Came and see what I've been growing, said Hagrid as Harry and Hermione finished the last of their tea. In the small vegetable patch behind Hagrid's house were a dozen of the largest pumpkins Harry had ever seen, each of the size of a boulder. Getting on well, aren't they? Said Hagrid happily. For the Halloween feast. Should be big enough by then. What have you been feeding them? Said Harry. Hagrid looked over his shoulder to check they were alone. Well, I've been giving them, a bit of help. Harry noticed Hagrid's flowery pink umbrella leaning against the back wall of the cabin. Harry had no reason to believe now that this umbrella was at all as it looked. In fact, he had the strong impression that Hagrid's old school wand was concealed inside it. Hagrid wasn't supposed to use magic. He'd been expelled from Hogwarts in his 3rd year. But Harry had never found out why. Any mention of the matter and Hagrid would clear his throat loudly and become mysteriously deaf until the subject changed. An engorgement charm, I suppose, said Hermione, halfway between disapproval and amusement. Well, you've done a good job then. That's what your little sister said Hagrid, nodding at Ron. Met her just yesterday. Hagrid looked sideways at Harry, his beard twitching. Said she was just looking round the grounds, but I reckon she was hoping she might run into someone else at my house. He winked at Harry. If you ask me, she wouldn't say no to a sign. Oh, shut up, said Harry. Ron snorted with laughter, and the ground was sprayed with slugs. Watch it, Hagrid roared, pulling Ron away from his precious pumpkins. It was nearly lunchtime, and as Harry had only one bit of treacle toffee since dawn, he was keen to go back to school and eat. They said goodbye to Hagrid and walked up to the castle, Ron hiccoughing occasionally, but only bringing up 2 very small slugs. They had barely set foot in the cool entrance hall when a voice rang out. There you are, Potter, Weasley. Professor McGonagall was walking towards them, looking stern. You will both do detention this evening. What are we doing, Professor? Said Ron nervously, suppressing a burp. You will be polishing the silver in the trophy room with Mr. Filch, said Professor McGonagall, and no magic. Weasley, elbow grease. Ron gulped. Argus Finch, the caretaker, was loathed by every student in the school. And you, Potter, you will be helping Professor Lockhart answer his fan mail, said Professor McGonagall. Oh no. Can't I go to the trophy room too, said Harry desperately. Certainly not, said Professor McGonagall, raising her eyebrows. Professor Lockhart requested you particularly. 8 o'clock sharp, both of you. Harry and Ron slouched into the great hall in states of deepest gloom. Hermione behind them, wearing a well you did break the school rules sort of expression. Harry didn't fancy his shepherd's pie as much as he thought. Both he and Ron felt though they got the worst deal. Filch had me there all night, said Ron heavily. No magic. There must be 100 cups in that room. I'm no good at muggle cleaning. I'd swap any time, said Harry hollowly. I've had loads of practice with the Dursleys. Answering Lockhart's fan mail, he'll be a nightmare. Saturday afternoon seemed to melt away, and in what seemed like no time, was 5 minutes to 8, and Harry was dragging his feet along the second floor corridor to Lockhart's office. He gritted his teeth and knocked. The door flew open at once. Lockhart beamed down at him. Ah, here's the scallywag, he said. Come in, Harry, come in. Shining brightly on the walls by the light of many candles were countlessly framed photographs of Lockhart. He had even signed a few of them. Another large pile lay on his desk. You can address the envelopes, Lockhart told Harry, as though this was a huge treat. This first one's to Gladys Gudson. Bless her. Huge fan of mine. The minutes snailed by. Harry let Lockhart's voice wash over him, occasionally saying, and right, and yeah. Now and then he caught a phrase like, fame's a fickle friend, Harry, or celebrity is as a celebrity does. Remember that. The candles burned lower and lower, making the light dance over the many faces of Lockhart's watching him. Harry moved his aching hand over what felt like the 1,000th envelope, writing out Veronica Smethy's address. It must be nearly time to leave, Harry thought miserably. Please let it be nearly time. And then he heard something. Something quite apart from a spitting of the dying candles and Lockhart's prattle in his ears. It was a voice. A voice to chill the bone marrow. A voice breathtaking, ice-cold venom. Come to me. Let me rip you. Let me tear you. Let me kill you. Harry gave a jump, and a large lilac blot appeared on Veronica Smethely's street. What? He said loudly. I know, said Lockhart. 6 solid months at the top of bestsellers list. Broke all records. No, said Harry frantically. That voice. Sorry, said Lockhart, looking puzzled. What voice? That voice said. Did you not hear it? Lockhart was looking at Harry in astonishment. What are you talking about, Harry? Perhaps you're getting a little drowsy. Great Scott, look at the time. We've been here nearly 4 hours. I'd never have believed it. The time's flown by, hasn't it? Harry didn't answer. He was straining his ears to hear the voice again, but there was no sound except for Lockhart's telling him he mustn't expect a little treat like this every time he got the tension. Feeling dazed, Harry left. It was so late that the Gryffindor common room was almost empty. Harry went straight up to the dormitory. Ron wasn't back yet. Harry pulled on his pajamas, got into bed, and waited. Half an hour later, Ron arrived, nursing his right arm and bringing a strong smell of polish into the darkened room. My muscles have all seized up, he groaned, sinking into the bed. 14 times. He made me buff up that Quidditch cup before he was satisfied, and then I had another slug attack all over a special award for services to the school. Took ages to shift the slime. How was it with Lockhart? Keeping his voice low so he wouldn't wake Neville, Dean, and Seamus, Harry told Ron exactly what he had heard. And Lockhart said he couldn't hear it, said Ron. Harry could see him frowning in the moonlight. Do you think he was lying? But I don't get it. Even someone invisible would have had to open the door. I know, said Harry, lying back in his four-poster and staring at the canopy above him. I don't get it either.